Media Essential Workers. We are on today with Chief Photographer at NBC5 Chicago, Bill Jennings. I'm not going to let the fact that he is my supervisor make me nervous or otherwise dissuade me. Billy, good to see you again for the second time today. You were actually on our radio show earlier, but we wanted to have an opportunity to talk to you with our media colleagues because it's been a long time since we've gotten together and actually discussed. It's good to see you. I see you're sporting a new look here.
Yeah, I am. It's just my COVID beard. By the way, after our radio show this afternoon, Raza, I got a wonderful call from the former president of our local, Ray Taylor, who happens to be a very, very close personal friend of mine, who applauded not only my broadcast, but your broadcast. You know what I said, it just to get the word out about the media and what we discussed in general. I mean, and it's funny, I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And, the trend now is scaring me. It's just the fact that we were always the reliable ones. Oh, good, the news media here, so they'll report what's going on, and that situation seems to have changed. And it's you get to situations and people don't want you there, and they berate you, and you get called names and fake news, and to the point where it's some of it's gotten violent, against the news media, and this is a trend that scares me in general.
Billy, I'm going to talk to you about that because you've done this for a long time. I want to see if this is like anything you've experienced in the past and how you advise to go through it. But I do want to take a moment to, again, thank Ray Taylor because he was, as many of us know, kind of like the godfather with the local union in ABET 41. He was an ABC engineer after Dan Delaney did this for multiple years, I think 20 plus years, and just can't thank him enough for being the shoulders that the rest of us kind of stand on when we go out there and try to be activists. And every day when I do what I go out there and do as the vice president of the union, I always think, well, how can I keep going with the legacy of what these guys have done? But also our industry, like you said, is evolving and changing like it never has before. We need to stay on top of those challenges and make sure our jurisdiction of work mirrors what we have to face going in the future. How do we balance that need with the contempt that sometimes we're facing, but still focus on the duties we have to do as journalists? How do you, Billy, as a veteran in this industry, see us moving forward in that respect?
Well, we just have to, at our end of the business, where, a photojournalist, you just have to do the, and it's an old saying, you have to do the next right thing. The next right thing is just, doing your job and doing it well, and staying on top of things. Unfortunately, in America in general, the news media is persona non grata every place we show up, where that never used to be the case, and that's a trend it's concerning to me as a multi-decade photojournalist. But it's unnerving that it's happening in places that, I mean, you expected these. I talked earlier about covering the American Nazi Party. You expect people, certain factions of this country, to be bombastic and confrontational and difficult to deal with, and I understand that. But now we're seeing it in suburban America. You go to I've had reports of guys going to rallies that like I said, they're high school. These are high school kids with their parents in Orland Park, in Crystal Lake, and places like that, where all of a sudden it turns into some type of political statement, a political rally, and we're persona non grata there. No one wants us there. They yell at us. They call us fake news. They challenge us.
Billy, I'm going to ask you something that kind of took me aback, and I kind of want you to weigh in on this and see what you say or what you think about this. So obviously Kenosha had a lot of activity that we were up there covering earlier in the month, and I actually ran into one of the international media. He's from Press TV. He worked at a French bureau for Irani television, but had come to Kenosha. He's actually covering the presidential election, but decided to come and cover what's happening there. And he said just watching what he had seen in TV in Europe, he was a little nervous and wanted to wear something that said foreign press because he thought American press, United States press was being targeted. This was almost unfathomable 10,
Yeah,
12, 15 years.
that should speak volumes to you. I mean, just the fact that that thought process even crossed his mind, because I'm international press. I'm not from here. I'm not your local media. I'm not who these people are considering fake news. Now, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I've never had, to my knowledge, I've worked with all of them. Carol Marine, Paul Hogan, Marianne Ahern, Phil Rogers. I mean, John Chancellor. I mean, I've worked with all of them, and I can never remember any instance where someone was told, you have to write something this way. We have a narrative here at this news organization, and we have to convey that point. To my knowledge, it's never happened, at least in my experience. And like I said earlier, I've been to, Lord knows how many news meetings, and I've never seen a government agency there. People that think that we're some clandestine organization, they're just wrong. It's misinformation. And I think some of it, when we cover the people that are protesting or civil unrest, or those people they're promoting their First Amendment rights. Well, one of the amendment rights is freedom of the press, and that's what we're trying to do. And no one goes out to tell a story a certain way. There's no pre-written story when you leave the building. You'll find out the story when you get there, because that's what happens. You don't know what's going on. And we've all gone out on stories with some type of preconceived notion of this is how something may come out, and it doesn't come out that way at all. But
and I think as a journalist working in the field, that's part of the benefits of what we do, is we learn something every day. Like you said, we may have a preconceived notion. We might think a certain way. We're put in a position where you have to hear other sides, other perspectives. You're taken out of your silo, and you're now put in a position where you get to see something else.
Raza, I'll never forget myself and Ana de Volantis and Pete Ranger went out to cover a powder puff hazing that went on, and I literally laughed on the way out there. I said, "Boy, we got the big story today! Ha ha ha!" It turned out to be an international story. Ana de Volantis and I did an interview on Australian radio. So you don't know what story you're going into, and that's one of the great things about my job. And I always tell people is when I was doing the day-to-day grind, going out to be and covering news, is that I know I'm going to be covering a news story today, but I don't know actually what I'll be doing today. And that was always the great part of at least for me anyway, that was I didn't have a job where I stapled the pinks to the blues. I went out and did something different every single day of my life. And that was always exciting to me. That was always the fun part of my job. Don't get me wrong. A lot of it was difficult because you have to do that news story in inclement weather and pouring rain and freezing cold. We live in Chicago, so it can be difficult, but especially, and now we have a worldwide pandemic, so it's just added that much more of a challenge.
And I'm going to actually take a step back and say, I know you've covered some things, and you say that's part of the greatness of your work. I'm sure you've also covered it alongside of some great people that you've learned a lot from. We were talking about Carol Marine earlier. She's retiring. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with the Chicago kind of television legacy. Describe some of the things that really stick in your mind, and anything you'd like for the rest of the people watching to kind of take away from this conversation.
Well, Carol Marine is the finest journalist I've ever worked with in my life, and I've worked with a great deal of them. The word integrity just pops to my mind immediately. Carol and I are not only colleagues, we're close personal friends as well. I played golf with Carol Marine. I mean, she's just not only a wonderful journalist. She's just a wonderful person, and her producer Don Mosley is same way. I mean, it's just, I've covered conventions with them. I've been all over, covered primaries with them. We've covered the Iowa caucus several cycles in a row. I've been at an inauguration with Carol. I literally traveled all over with her. Marianne Ahern. She and I have been literally all over the world together. Same with Phil Rogers. I mean, and those are just the people that are still around.
Hey, Billy, I'm going to interrupt you just for a real quick second. I'm going to have Sarah pop up an overlay about your one of your actual stories that you covered with Phil Rogers from NATO, and I want to get some kind of clarification as to what exactly this was. Billy, what am I looking at here? You look a little in the middle of things.
Yeah, that was, I actually got in I got a little trouble for that one. We had classes that said. Don't get yourself between the police and the protesters. I obviously missed that class, but we had, Phil and I were just in the thick of it, and it was. By the way, we won an Emmy for that. It was just something that, and that I felt. I felt okay. I mean, and Phil was very supportive and wonderful. I remember when a guy from the Black Bloc tried to put his hand over my lens, and Phil slapped his hand away and said, "Hey, you're exercising your First Amendment rights. We're exercising ours. Let us do our job." And we were. And I'll tell you, I applaud the Chicago Police Department. I couldn't believe how disciplined they were and how wonderful they were. I mean, I saw some things happen that I don't know if I would have been able to take that kind of abuse from somebody in my face and do nothing. It was one of those situations where they handled themselves magnificently, and it was a big story. And I felt Phil and I felt that to tell that story, certain times you have to be in there, and so we were in there. Now it started to get pretty heated, and we got out of there. And I definitely was spoken to about from management about. I probably should not have been there, and I wouldn't advise other people to follow that. But boy, oh boy, the story that Phil cut that night, no one had that footage. It was something else.
I've had the pleasure of working with Phil Rogers myself. Sometimes just protest, but just the adrenaline he has, just the spirit of getting in and getting the story from as many perspectives as he can is another level of intensity that I've dealt with a couple of times, but you've dealt with it, I'm sure, a lot more. Tell me some of the stories, some of the experiences, some of the travel you've done with Phil, and I mean, kind of paint a picture for us. You don't have your camera to tell the story now, so illustrate to us visually what you experienced.
Well, I remember I was in China with Phil in 2008. He went over. I was working for the Stations Division, so we were, covering, sidebar stories, and I worked. One of the guys I worked with is a sports guy out of New York named Bruce Beck, who was just absolutely fabulous to work for. Phil was actually there, if you'll recall. Mayor Daley and his team with Pat Ryan went over because Chicago was still in the running for the 2016 Olympics. So they were over there to see how Beijing did it, and of course it was unbelievable. But so Phil and I went out and did stories, several times. I remember him, worried, and you know how Phil is, and he's one of my best friends. I played golf with him yesterday. I mean, Phil, said one.
My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail for that.
Yeah, it was just Phil and I and Angie. We went out and played 9 holes, but we try to do that on Saturday mornings. But Phil came. He walked in. He said, "Billy, I don't have anything. I've got nothing today." And I said, "Phil, there's a 4,000-year-old pagoda at the end of the block. We could, let's go into a McDonald's. I mean, we're in Beijing. It's like being on Pluto. No one from Chicago has ever been here, or normally most people haven't, and most people won't ever go there. So, go out and just tell a story about, just, life as it goes by." And he did that. I remember him thanking me, saying, well, what a good idea to just, tell how life was there. But I tell you, just getting back to Carol real quick, I don't want to forget. I have not spoken with her since she announced her retirement. I will, of course, because we're friends. But you know what? That's a loss for Carol Marin and Don Mosley. That team leaving Chicago politics is a loss for the people of the city of Chicago, because there was there is nobody that told things like they were. And I've been on mob stories with her. I've been on political stories with her. I've been undercover with her. I mean,
Billy, tell me what it's like going to Springfield with her when you don't have to find the politicians and the politicians make sure.
You know what? I have a story about that. If you got 2 minutes, we were in Washington.
I got as much time as you're willing to give up.
Well, we were in Washington covering President Obama's second inauguration. It was Carol Marin, myself, Marianne Ahern, and they had to hire a crew from Washington because actually they couldn't get accommodations. The hotel rooms were all sold out. So I went out with Marianne that morning and shot a story, and I could tell this crew that came in that they hired was more of a production crew. I could just tell by their gear, how much gear they carried with them and how many cases. I said, dude, these guys are more production than they are news. So I was going to go out with Carol, and Don Mosley, her producer, said, absolutely not, Billy. You stay with Marianne, grab a bite to eat, cut her early show package, so as the crew went out, I told the crew, I said, listen, guys, don't ever forget, you got to be ready to go because Carol's a different breed. I said, she doesn't chase politicians. Politicians will stop and walk up to her. And so kind of be ready to go. And when they got back, I could tell on the guy's face that something hadn't gone real well. I said to him, I said, well, what happened? And he said, you didn't tell me that Jesse Jackson would stop his motorcade and back it up to talk to her. They were at the Martin Luther King Memorial, and Carol appeared on the scene, and that's exactly what Jesse Jackson did. He had a 3-car motorcade, and they stopped, and all 3 cars backed up, and he got out. And I said, so were you guys ready? He said, well, it took us a minute. I said, well, unfortunately, Jesse probably wanted to be on TV that day anyway, so it worked out. But he told me, he said, I worked in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. I've never seen that happen ever. And that's we were in line to go to get into the inauguration, and we saw Danny Davis. I spotted him, as a matter of fact, and I say, okay, you guys stay in line. And I went over and I said, Congressman Davis, would you? I'm Bill Jennings from NBC. He said, hi, Bill. I said, Carol Marin would like to have a word with you. And he said, absolutely. And he walked right over. I mean, that's the kind of respect that people, that everyone has for Carol, especially politicians. They know, you talk to Carol because, you don't hide from Carol because she's going to find something. If you're hiding something, she's going to find it.
Let me ask you this, that investment in journalism, that investment in telling the story of people that really people are going to find you because they know you're the person to talk to. Do you see that continuing going forward? Is that something that our industry is going to be able to sustain? Does it need to sustain it to make sure that we follow up on the legacy that we have stood on? Between a rock and a hard place, I'm sure, but at the same time,
I know. I mean, no one, there's never, ever going to be another Carol Marin, period. I mean, they broke the mold. I mean, they just did. I mean, she's, now there are, there are some, wonderful journalists in Chicago now, but, it's one of those fortunate things that I could say that I had the opportunity to work with Carol and I had to work with Carol. I got to work with Carol, cover big stories with her. And I'll tell you something, I remember we were leaving some big event, and she gave me a hug and she said, "I follow you to the gates of hell, Billy." And I'll tell you, that's more than an Emmy. That's more than anything. When you're respected as a photojournalist, as a colleague by Carol Marin, there's no higher praise. So for her to say that to me was the greatest thing ever. She's just, she's, when Carol calls me, I never say no. I mean, she could. I've done every. I will do anything for Carol. She needed she needed a hole put into the strap of one of her purse straps, and you know what? She gave it to me.
Let me find the tools to do it.
Yeah, we marked it with a Sharpie, and I figured it out. And you know, I've been. That's one of the fortunate things in my life, that I've been able to work with people like that. She's something. I mean, she's something else.
I promised you when we spoke that I wouldn't take more than 30 minutes of your time. You were already good enough to give me 20 minutes on the radio earlier to talk, but I do want to just go over the breakfast hour a little bit, about how colleagues from different stations, what it was a tradition after your AM shift. Tell us the
we used to go. There was a guy named Steve Lasker who was a photojournalist at CBS, and he was on the morning crew. Paul Nagaro and I. Eugene and Jackie from ABC. Unfortunately, we just lost Eugene. They were on. There was some, some other people that bounced in and out. But Steve Lasker had this. He had this ability. He had, no matter where we were, I'm telling you, north side, south side, west side, it didn't make any difference. After that first initial morning shoot, Steve knew a joint, a greasy spoon, a diner, some kind of restaurant in the area, and they always had some kind of specialty, like, oh, wait till you taste the red eye gravy here, or wait till you taste the biscuits and gravy here, or you know, this place has got thick cut bacon, and we would go and have breakfast, and we talked about it on the show earlier. I mean, I didn't even realize that, you know, because a lot of the events we covered weren't pleasant. You know, when that morning crew, a lot of them were dead bodies, tragedies, fires where people were displaced or died in. So, I never really thought about it. You actually made me think earlier about it, that, that breakfast was, somewhat of a therapy for us. I mean, not that we did, sometimes we talked about our, how, the newsrooms aren't, oh, news this, news that, and that kind of thing. But we talk about our families, and we talk about our friends, and we talk about sports, and we just, you just talk about life in general, and that got you through some of the stuff that you were doing. And it wasn't like we sat down to say, hey, let's have a therapy session so we can get through this. It happened naturally. And, I look back on those times with great fondness, because they meant a great deal to me. My partner, I spoke of him, Paul Nagaro, who was my mentor, taught me how to shoot. And as he did, half the people at NBC, but he was just my, my mentor, my friend, and my colleague, and my confidant. So to this day, I mean, when I used to drive into work, Paul worked the morning overnight shift, and I would call Paul and just say, hey, these are things that I've got coming up. And I knew not only would he give me advice, but he'd give me sound advice. Sometimes he would agree with me. And then sometimes he'd say, Billy, did you look at it this way? Did you think of it this way? And those are the things those are the relationships that I forged early in my career. There were more people. When I started at NBC, we had 212 engineers. Now, Raza, what do we have? 65, 60. So, I mean, there were a great deal more people there. No, great. Automation automation and attrition has changed, but there was a 2-man crew in Minicam, and that was your partner. And he was your partner, and that's all there is to it. And Paul and I became very close. I have some pictures. You know what? Hold on. I have them. I just happen to have them sitting right here. This was unplanned. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, hold it right up there. I can see that. Okay. And Sarah's grateful that she doesn't have to do the overlays and all that. So
okay, this picture is of Paul Nagaro and I. I'm going to say circa 1984, 1985. And
you look like you're in high school there, Billy.
That was before child labor.
Drink down.
So Paul Nagaro and I were in New Orleans, and we were covering a very interesting story. We literally went to the airport to follow a group of Ukrainians that were going down to New Orleans to try to stop a Russian ship from leaving port. And when we got to the airport, they said, just get on the plane. We didn't have clothes. We didn't have a tripod. We didn't have anything. So we went down to cover this story. So that's one picture of Paul Nagaro and I. And this is the second one. that I want to show you. This is the night that Paul was inducted into the Silver Circle. For those who do not know, that's
I did not know that he was inducted. Yeah, explain to us the honor that's.
Well, first of all, it's for minimum. No member has under 25 years of journalism experience, and Paul and his lovely wife Anna, who we lost this year, were inducted together. And that was the night of his induction. I was there, and obviously we were having a good time. But those two pictures together, are my friendship with Paul. I mean, they're 35 years apart. Those two pictures, and you seem to, our hair's a little grayer, a little more silver in it, but same smiles and same men, and we've helped each other all the way, and we've been through everything together. Marriages, divorces, strikes, reduction in staff, layoffs. All the things that go in our business, and we still maintain our friendship. I spoke to him. I texted with him yesterday or 2 days ago.
Huh. Now, actually, Paul had told me a story that you were probably part of as well. And you're going to have to refresh my memory because I forget the name of this. It was in Oregon when the town was kind of when they started their own town there. I know.
Yeah. Paul was on that. Paul, was he with? I think he might have been with Rich Samuels on that story.
That's funny. Rich is supposed to join us as well on one of these podcasts, and I'm very much interested.
There's Rich Samuels, still a friend, and Paul Hogan, who unfortunately passed away. He and I were very close. We were in Eastern Europe for the fall of communism and the 50-year anniversary of World War II. I was in Warsaw, Poland. And
wait, so tell me about that. You were there for the network, or you were there for local news?
No. I was there for local. We took over the stations division. So we reported to NBC, New York, Washington, Miami, LA, Denver, Chicago, Cleveland. All the owned television stations at that time. We were there for. So you
are front seat to history being made. I mean, I remember I still have that newspaper, but tell me about what it's like, the fall of communism, being there, helping under that.
Well, this was 1989, and don't ask me how I still remember these names. Tadeusz Mazowiecki became the first non-communist prime minister since World War II. And we were there covering, the transition. And we did everything from go to the thieves market to the lines around the embassies of people trying to get out, entrepreneurs coming, Polish Americans that were coming home because now they saw opportunity. Like, I would like to come there and start a business, and it was just an absolute wonderful story. It was, and so it happened to coincide with September of 1939, where when Germany invaded Poland, and so we stood in the square in Warsaw when the sirens went off, and everyone observed a minute of silence, and it was literally the entire city of Warsaw stopped. Cars stopped, streetcars stopped, every person on the street stopped. And a great deal of it's a very Roman Catholic country. A great deal of them were kneeling and genuflecting. And it was I just got a chill. It was a moment I'll never forget. We also went to Auschwitz. The story I shot there was just, it's just something that I'll just never forget. And just talking about the Polish Americans, I also covered with Marianne Ahern the canonizations of the saints, canonization of the popes, which was Good Pope John and Pope John Paul II, who was obviously from Poland, and we were there in St. Peter's Square in the day of his canonization, and we saw an American flag, and I went up to a woman. And I said, here, come talk to us. And she was a little shy. She said, no, my English isn't very good. I said, where are you from? She was from my parish.
Huh.
So we got her to talk to us and get a story. So I've had a couple of, unbelievable experiences, with the Polish American community here.
Well, so I got to ask you, so you've had kind of connections at some of these stories you've been to. Tell me about some of the stories that had the most meaning to you, some of the ones that are most memorable, some that really stand out. You've had a pretty illustrious, expansive career, but what are some of the ones that really stick out in your mind as
Well, the Poland trip is one I brought up. That's something I'll never forget. Being in Beijing, it was just one of those places, like I said, and don't get me wrong, I'll never forget it. But, prior to that, I would have, if I had 10 cities in the world that I would love to go see, Beijing may not have even made the list. But by going there and experience first of all, the Olympic, the whole Olympic experience, but being able to go and do stories there was really something else. But I've covered some magnificent stories in Rome with Marianne Ahern. But I've done some local stories here. One of the things I did with Peggy Kaczynski was a story about our sports reporter Mike Adamley, and Mike and I were very close and still are very close. His father and my father played in the NFL. Father and his father were opponents. My father played for the Cardinals, and his father played for the Browns. But my father lived in Ohio and was a member of the NFL Alumni Association, so we knew a lot of the same people. And as we know, Mike is struggling with pre-dementia and some of the effects of the NFL of playing football for as long as he did. And my father died of Lou Gehrig's disease, and it was the greatest honor he ever had in his life, and he said that was to play in the NFL. However, I know that football killed my father, and to do that story. And Mike was so brave, and his wife Kim was wonderful, and Peggy did a great job. It was just it was a magnificent story to tell, and I was absolutely honored to be there. I would have done it for nothing. I mean, it was that important of a story, and we all were awarded for it. We all won an Emmy for it because it was that good a story. I mean, it would have won an Emmy anywhere because it was that good a story. Peggy did a magnificent job writing it, and Mike was Mike. So I mean, I've had the opportunity to cover some big stories, and I'll tell you though, the ones that stick with you are usually the more personal stories. The ones where you really feel a connection with the people that you're covering, families. Phil Rogers and I actually went and covered a funeral, and this is one of those. This is something that I can say that very, very few people can say. I covered the funeral of a man who died at Pearl Harbor. Huh. His nephew. There's a whole tomb of the unknown at Pearl Harbor, and now with today's technology, they've started to exhume some of these remains and find out who these people are, and they actually buried this man who had been, part of the unknowns, and we did it. I think it was last year, and he was buried at Abraham Lincoln Cemetery, Abraham Lincoln in Joliet, where it's a military cemetery, and I got to be there with that family, and being a vet, to cover that story and be there for that funeral was again just an honor. So, I mean, I've covered some really, I've had I look back on my career and it's just been magnificent. And it's been a lot of fun and it's challenging. I worry about, I worry about our industry in the future. I know we're in a pandemic and, we use Zoom interviews and things like that, but you just, Raza, you've done this when you light somebody and you're doing an interview with somebody and the tears start to come and you do the zoom ins and you and you get the feel for it. I just hope that doesn't go away, because that's what a good cameraman, a good reporter, good correspondent. I mean, they can really do some. They can change things, and they can change people's perception of things. We did a magnificent half-hour documentary with Warner Saunders. It was called "Can't Get No Job Without No Diploma," and it was a story about. It was a half-an-hour documentary on. Mary Hines was the producer. Warner was the talent, and we went out and at that time. There was a guy named Bennett. He was he was a cabinet member, and he said the Chicago public school system was the worst school system in America, and the dropout rate was right around 50%. So we went out and found programs and people and teachers, and that we wanted to know. Okay, if you say 50% dropout, why do 50% stay? And we went to some of the schools that you wouldn't think are by any stretch, a pillar of education. And I'm telling you, it was uplifting, just to talk to these teachers and their dedication and the kids and the families. And it was just it was just eye opening to me. And I hoped that we. In our documentary and in our storytelling, we were able to show that, just because it's a school that's, it's not on the North Shore, or it's, it isn't a Francis Parker, or it isn't a Walter Payton. It was, a tougher high school. That, it was just, we were able to show that this is great. Yeah. Right.
Billy, I'm sorry. I'm holding this up because I don't know if you see the comments, but Chuck Quinzio just wrote in, Billy, with all these stories, you're officially considered an old timer. I consider.
Yeah. I don't know how that happens. I guess if, somebody said that, asked me, well, how old are you? I said, if you just keep living, you'll get this far if you're lucky, and there's another guy, Chuck Quinzio. He and I are still dear friends. His daughter's getting married this month. Of course, as usual, everything got trimmed way down. But, I've known Chuck since, 1983. And, he's just, he's a friend. I mean, I call him all the time. We talk and laugh. And when I see him on big stories, we were all at Jussie Smollett, in that, mangled mess down there, or we were at both Blagojevich trials almost every day. So it's just, and Chuck worked at NBC with me when we were both daily hires, and it was we were both vacation relief, excuse me, and we just have maintained our friendship. He's just one of the wonderful guys that I'm fortunate enough to have as a colleague and as a friend.
And I'm just going to put this out there again. The reason I do these interviews is because I sometimes feel like a kid in a campfire hearing these about the television news I wanted to get into, what I used to watch and be like, this is what I wanted to do. And just hearing about some of the stories. And Chuck is also the author of Life Behind the Camera, which is the book I held up, which tells stories. I think names have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Yeah. But this was just a great book, which gives you a funny perspective and a raw perspective. If you know Chuck, it's a real. There's no hiding anything. But just a great book that you guys should pick up if you haven't. I'm a few years behind in plugging this, but it's still out there. And I advise you to read it. I mean, like you were saying, Billy, just great stories that you got to get from the people who lived it, who witnessed it, who experienced it.
Well, and I'll tell you something. I always laugh and I said, "Gee, I wish they would have told us this. These are the good old days. I would have had more fun."
So Cowboy here says, "Billy, we will catch up. Billy will catch up to me eventually."
Yeah, I know.
Good to hear from you, Cowboy.
There's another guy. Dave Durham is one of my closest friends at work. That I went on. I'll tell you a Dave Durham. I'll tell you a Dave Durham story. I got offered to go on the 1984 presidential campaign by a cameraman named Randy Birch, who's since passed away. But Randy Birch, his sound man was Jimmy McDonald, who you knew, Raza.
Jimmy was actually on one of our things. He was telling a lot of the stories.
Another great friend and a great guy. But Jimmy did not want to go on the campaign. So he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to go, Bill?" And I said, "I think this is what they call opportunity knocking." So I said yes. And I went on the road and got all my gear, and I was way over my skis. I didn't have anywhere near the experience or the knowledge to be a network sound man traveling with presidential candidates. And we were on nightly news virtually every day. So when I got to Washington, there were two two-man crews covering each candidate. That shows you the difference of time period. And it was Randy Birch and myself, and it was Bob DeServi and Dave Durham. And Dave Durham looked at me. He said, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "Do you have everything you need? Do you know everything? You have any questions?" And I thought to myself, I have to come clean with somebody eventually. And I said, "No, I'm over my skis." But I thought this. I was offered the opportunity to cover the presidential election in 1984 for NBC News, and it seemed like something I shouldn't say no to. And he looked at me and said, "You were right to take it. That was a smart move. We'll teach you everything." And he literally taught me everything. He taught me, everything from, how to handle a boom mic to,
Now, Billy, from talking to Jimmy Mack and a few other people, I was talking to Mabel, I was talking to a bunch of people who have covered these. These weren't going on campaigns covering these. These weren't easy. This wasn't easy work. I mean,
they were
brutal is what I had.
We would have 4 and 5 o'clock baggage calls. It was not unusual to do 9 cities and 4 or 5 states in one day. That was not unusual. You'd land at an airport, have an airport event. You might do you do a breakfast. I was with Geraldine Ferraro, who was the first, national candidate, female national candidate. She was Walter Mondale's vice presidential candidate, running mate. And we started in Iowa one morning, did an event in New York, and then did a nighttime event in Los Angeles. So we literally we went 1.5 times across the country. This was in one day, and this was not unusual. I think I tallied it up one time. I believe I was home 23 days the whole year. I mean, this is what people don't understand when you commit to something like that. I mean, you have no idea how many guys I've had to say, "Hey, sorry, I can't stand up in your wedding because it's during the conventions," or how many baptisms and parties and birthday parties and stuff like that you miss because you've made a commitment to be to work in this business. And it's just and we've all done it, and I'll tell you, I'll never forget. I was dating a girl. And
I was just going to ask you Harold Washington story, and it looks like you're getting
I was dating a girl, and the relationship wasn't perfect anyway. But she was from out of town, and we were going up to Madison, Wisconsin, to spend Thanksgiving with her parents. I mean, with her father and her siblings and their families. And Harold Washington dropped dead on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and Paul Nagaro and we were the first NBC crew at the hospital. So I finally got a hold of her. I'll never forget this. I borrowed Dick Kay, which is another great political guy that I worked with for years.
He's on the radio station that you were on today, the day before on Saturdays.
I know. I listened to him. He's another great, another guy that I could, talk about for an hour. But he let me borrow one of those big clunky phones. It was the first cell phone. So I went down the ramp. There used to be a ramp at Northwestern's emergency room. It's set up a little different now. But I went down and I dialed her and I got a hold of her. She answered. I said, "Hi, how you doing?" She said, "Good." I said, "You know Harold Washington tonight?" She said, "Yeah, I heard it on the radio. I figured you'd be working late." I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm still at the hospital." She said, "Okay, just let me know what time you think you'll get out of there. So I want to call my dad and let him know that we're going to be late. What time do you think we'll arrive there? And it's dead silence on the phone. And I reiterated, I said,
You read it back to her. You read back what you had said earlier.
I said,
dramatic effect.
Harold Washington just died. And she said, I know. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. She said, what do you mean? I said, are you kidding me? But now the story begins. I mean, so I said, I'm not sorry. You're going to have to go without me. And so she did. But I remember when she got back that she looked at me, and the relationship eventually ended. But I remember her specifically saying, if you think I'm going to play second fiddle to NBC News for the rest of my life, you're sadly mistaken. And I understood it. I understood it. Now, you know, my wife, Mary Phyllis, now is just wonderful. And she knew when she, you know, started dating me that, you know, I was a photojournalist. So subsequently she understands, but you know, there's guys, and I know your lovely wife, Sarah. I mean, she understands. She understands what you do and what.
She's here producing for me behind.
Of course it is. I was gonna thank her not to forget to thank the production staff, because they're the ones that really pulled this off. But you know, and I just, you know, it's the families too. You know, it's the families that you know, live with it. It's, you know, I was in the Marine. I've had 2 jobs since I was 17. I was in the Marine Corps for seven years, and then after that, I've been a photojournalist. So I mean, that's all I've ever done. You know, I don't know how to live my life any other way, but it's just, and it's been absolutely the most rewarding career that I could ever imagine. However, it is a commitment, and you do give up a lot. And you know, we've all done. Raza, how many weekend mornings have you done? And I you know, I ran Studio 5 for a couple of years, where your in time was, you know, it's not a shift, it's a lifestyle. You know, you have to go to bed every night at 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I mean,
you know, I'll usually hit the bed at 7 and then be waking up at 8 o'clock for a union question. So yeah, I know how it goes. There's always
exactly. Exactly. And you know, and I'm the chief photographer, and I have my phone with me, and when you know, Mike, you know, somebody calls me on a Saturday afternoon, you know, I answer the phone, because not only do I feel a responsibility to the guy, I've been there. You know, I've been, you know, when you're in the field and you're in a live truck and all of a sudden something's not working and you can't figure it out, and you call somebody, you want somebody at the other end to say, hey, did you try this? Hey, did you try this? Hey, did you try that? And, you know, I've been in other countries where, you know, something wasn't working, and you know, you got to call. And so I never forgot that. And, you know, so to be a, you know, if I can be, you know, and I'm not saying I'm some kind of magician that can fix everything, but I may have an idea. You know, I can't get
sometimes, yeah, when things are going wrong, you're in kind of a panic mode. You know how to solve it if you had ideal time, if everything was working, but we're on a deadline driven thing. And
right.
It's like, oh, what do I do? And you need that, you know,
Phil Rogers has a great saying. He said, the clock is our enemy every day. And it is, because it's going to be 5 o'clock when the news goes on, whether you're ready or not. So, but I mean, if a guy calls me and can't get the generator started on a live truck, I said, well, is the truck running? And maybe you check that. It's an older truck. It's got a battery repair law. Why don't you try that? And, oh, okay. And he got it started. And, you know, I was happy to help out. And that's why I've always been, always try to, I just saw something from Mary Hines. Mary Hines, she was the one who produced that one show for me. It's with me. It's just been great. You know, it's been a great. Raza, I thank you so much for having me on.
You know, I very much thank you, because again, I know I told you just a few minutes of your time of your Sunday. So I really thank you and your family for sharing you with us, not only on this broadcast, but our radio broadcast earlier. Thank you very much. But I think it's very important for us to stay in touch while we're physically separated with this pandemic. I think we need to kind of revisit ourselves and let us know that we're all out there healthy and share our story. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Raza. And I'll tell you something. It is something that, you know, especially during this time, you know, You know, I called Todd Roberts the other day just because you know I hadn't talked to Todd. You know, he's very good at what he does. You know, he hasn't had any. He hasn't had any equipment or truck trouble. But I just, you know, I miss him, and he's a dear friend of mine, and kind of a shirt tail cousin, and so we're, you know, so I just picked up the phone and talked to him. It's very important. You know, that's if I miss. You know, I never realized how much you know, I really would miss everybody. But, you know, what I miss is just, you know, us sitting around, the empowerment that we have that, hey, I'm having this trouble. I had this happen to me. Here's what I did. And it said, oh, well, you know what? I had that happen to me one time before. And here's what I did. And it worked out. And, you know, I remember someone taught me. I remember someone tried to rob a crew, and it was at knife point, not gunpoint. And he said, "No, our company doesn't allow us to carry any money." And the guy went, "What?" He's like, "No, we're not allowed to carry any cash." And it befuddled the guy, but you know what? He left him alone. You know, I mean, it was just, I was like, wow, I'll never forget that. You know, that if anyone ever, you know, tries to rob me or steal from me, I say, look, you can do what you want, but I don't have any money because I'm not allowed to. So you just learn things from, you know, people along the way. And it's just, you know, it's just, you know, and I miss that. I miss that camaraderie where we can get that, you know, get around and talk to one another and kick things around and share things.
And you know, we really appreciate the fact that you took the time on this Sunday to come and speak with us. So thank you again for that. I'm kind of, while I'm talking, reading this comment here about waking up at the early mornings, something that I know for years you had a lot of experience with, Billy.
And you know what? If you're in the business long enough, you'll work every shift. I mean, I work nights, I work mornings, I work days. You know, you know, it's just the way it is. It's you know, it's but you know what? If and there's something to be said about each shift. You know, that I worked with. It was Ellie Pie Hong, Dick Johnson, who we just lost, who we became dear friends. He and I became very close friends. Andy Avalos and I are still very close friends. And Jean Sparrow, and she and I are still friends. And there's something about that crew that has to come to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get a kind of bond that's different than another shift. So, you know, I look back at Studio 5, people say, God, wasn't that horrible? You know what? It was, of course, you know, getting up at 1:30 in the morning when it's, you know, 4 degrees out, and having to go to stand out on the plaza with the wind howling, you know, out of the southwest up the river. But, you know, those are the memories, they fade. But the memories I have with you know, that I had with the people with me, I mean, I'll never forget.
Oh Billy, God. It sounds like you might need to tend to that. So before I get you in any more trouble at home, I'm going to let you enjoy time and clean up whatever mess that is. Thank you again, Billy.
My best to Sarah. Sarah, nice job, my friend.
We couldn't do this without her. Thank you, Billy. Bye-bye. Talk to you guys later. Bye.